Hey, what's up everybody? Motley GM here. Now today's video is my third in my list of companies that I recommend over the corporate overlords that own our hobby's flagship game. And this game also represents a first for the channel here, in which this is a game where the system itself I don't have a ton of experience with, but it's also a game that's influenced my GM style a great deal. Hopefully that will interest you at least a little bit. Now, the company that we're talking about today is, of course, Runehammer Games. We're going to focus mostly on index card RPG because that's the game that started it all. It's also the D20 system that falls in line with the rules that I kind of set for myself for this list. Also featured on the table is an index card RPG, Magic: The Lost Tome, and it's kind of a flex that I'm putting there. I will not be covering this book today, but if it's something you're interested in me looking over with you, let me know in the comments below, and I'll put that in the schedule for a future video. I've considered Index Card RPG to be Runehammer's flagship game for quite a while, but I feel that may be changing here a little bit. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let me first say that, as always, this is not a paid video in any way. Any book or anything else you see on the table here is something I paid for myself. And I do not have any affiliate links, so any links you have below are just me linking you to stuff that I'm hoping will be helpful to you. I will say that Runehammer Games easily made this list due to the dedication to the hobby, presence in the overall community, a great game lineup, and another one of those companies that you could just feel good about supporting. Runehammer Games also provides a one-and-done solution for those looking for all they need in just one place. If you value games that pave a path for your creativity by offering just enough of a framework to build on, stay tuned and let's take a look at Runehammer Games. Now, from what I can understand, Runehammer essentially started in 2016 with a series of Sharpie drawings that ended up becoming Index Card RPG by a man with more names than any one member of the Wu-Tang Clan. That's Hankerin Fernale, or Brandish Gilhelm, or is it Ingrid Bernal? Well, if I actually pronounce any of those names correctly, that's at least a few of them. But for the sake of this video, I'll stick to Brandish because I like it the best and I at least feel I'm pronouncing that one correctly. So Brandish himself is a former creative in the video game industry and broke off to create Runehammer after Index Card RPG really took off. Now, from my understanding, Brandish never really went the Kickstarter route with Index Card RPG, and it was kind of before that stuff started becoming a huge deal, and he was able to market and publish his game on his own, creating Runehammer in the process. Now, he has since created a few other games. Notably, to kind of showcase them a little bit here, we have games like Viking Death Squad. Of course, Index Card RPG has updated to a Master Edition, which we're going to go over today. Games like the Sci-Punk Anthology, which is 3 games contained in there. Easy D6 by DM Scotty, which is a game we'll go over in the future. Again, however, that is under the Runehammer umbrella now. Most recently, we have Crown and Skull, which is a game I hope to play and go over more in the future. Volume 1 of Crown and Skull came out in 2024, with the new Volume 2 release is on pre-order as of the recording of this video. I'm recording this in January of 2025. A link to Runehammer is in the description below. There you can find games offered, a blog, links to all the social media, including a busy and robust Discord channel, and just about any information you can find. Runehammer also has a podcast and a YouTube channel. That stuff you should find through the links that I have below. Now, Runehammer Games totally lean into the DIY spirit of the hobby, and that's not hidden. Now, I've heard people actually complain about this point or point it out as a weakness of the game, which I think is kind of silly because he's very forward about the fact that this game requires and intends for a lot of DIY. This is very much in line with the early game, where there weren't so many resources available and coming up with your own things and doing things on your own was the norm. So I honestly feel that the DIY aspect of the game is actually a strength of an Index Card RPG, or at least the philosophy behind that. Something else to note, as of recently, I believe it was in 2024, Runehammer has opened a physical brick and mortar store in Philly for those who are in the area and want to go check it out. And there you can even meet the man himself. You might even walk away with a couple books and a place at a game table. You never really know. The link to the Runehammer site gives you the address to that place and everything. Go check it out if you're there, or if you're visiting the area and you're into tabletops. Go see a man who's had a lot of influence on the tabletop game. If I could ever get back out to the East Coast, I will definitely make a trip just to check out that store, to be honest with you. But all that being said, let's take a look at the game that got it all started, Index Card RPG. In this case, we'll be looking at the Master Edition, and will certainly give you a good idea of the look and feel of Runehammer's games in general. But with no further ado, let's head over to the PDF and look at what I think makes this game so awesome. All right, everybody, here we are at the PDF. Checking out Index Card RPG Master Edition. As always, I want to take a quick stop at the page that tells us the artist and the editors and all that stuff. Take a look. You'll see some familiar names on this list if you look closely, most noticeably Kelsey Dion. We've spoken of her during the Arcane Library and Shadow Dark video. Big shout out to her, as she is an amazing creator in her own right. And I always love to see my favorite creative people get together and create together. Brandish, of course, does all of his own artwork, similar to some other games. And I really love Brandish's style. And again, just human artwork with a style that, evokes a certain feeling for a game is something I always appreciate. It's really the thing that draws you in, ropes you in, and kind of gives you your beginning inspiration of the type of stories or the type of world that you're inserting your players into. And that's something I always enjoy. So big shout out to him, of course, for his artwork on top of just giving us a great game. And thanks to all these people who brought this game to us. Making a quick stop here at the core system. I want to stop at this first page because it initially says something that I think is pretty awesome. And if you read here, I'll just scroll down here a little bit so you can see it a little bit easier for yourself. But this tells you right away that Index Card RPG is mostly a mindset, a philosophy, a way to look at playing games than it is a system per se. Don't get me wrong, there's a system here, and what I feel is quite a genius system. A lot of what Brandish does with Index Card RPG, I think, really influenced many other game creators. This has really influenced my GMing style quite a bit, so I wanted to point this out, how he points it out right here. He does also talk about the clockwise turns instead of initiative, effort dice, which we'll talk about here in a minute, targets, and targets are basically just like with any D20 system. You have a target, you have to meet or beat it, and stats. Here it just tells us that we're using just the stat bonuses and that everything is basically using stats to figure out if you can accomplish it or not. Very, very typical D20 rollover system. It does advocate for playing in turns even when not in combat. However, it often does state you can just go what's called free form, where you don't play in turns. And this, I feel, is the typical way most of us play, where when it's combat or something tactical or that requires some kind of conflict or some kind of challenge, that you need to roll for it and use turns, and that outside of that you just kind of go with the flow and see what happens. And I like that it gives both options here, because some people do like the structure of turns even during roleplay. Here it gives the very basic bones of how roleplay works, and I love the way it's presented. And one of the things about Index Card RPG that makes it such an influential game is its presentation really takes a lot of the question out of how to be a GM, what it all means. And if you're new to GMing, and especially if you're daunted by being a GM, this is an excellent book to have, even if it's just for some of the tips. And later on, you'll see with the GM section, even just for that, it's worth having. Now we're talking the core system. It talks about the 3 types of turns. And this is, again, this is typical D20 system stuff. You can take your action, you can move in action, or you can just move really far. Very typical stuff. The actions that you take are also broken down into 3 other types. Simple actions that need no roll, checks that are your roll on a stack, and attempts. This is where you meet or beat a target and roll your effort. And again, the effort dice we'll talk about in just a few minutes here. Target is talking about the target number, the target you have to meet or beat to succeed in whatever you're trying to do. Classic, but also universal. Here we're going to take a quick stop at effort dice so we can talk about them a little bit. Effort dice is what you roll after an successful attempt is made to see either what kind of damage you do or if you succeed or in anything. And I really, really like this. I've never used this entire system, but I've taken bits and pieces of this and inserted into other games when things were a little bit unclear or I needed a little bit more than just a D20 roll to figure it out. And I've used this without even telling my players that I've used it and it's come from this system. I've really been wanting to play using this dice system a little bit more intently, and I'm hoping to do that in the year 2025. But a quick breakdown: you got your D4, you roll after an attempt. This is just for basic things: punch, something that takes strength, stuff like that. Your D6 is for basic weapons and tools. If you have a gun or something more deadly, you use a D8. D10 will give you magic or specialized energy, depending on what type of genre you're playing. And D12 is just the ultimate roll that you can make for effort. I mean, that adds on to a successful attempt. So as you can see, these could be your damage die. These could be used as a way to accomplish something that you need to accomplish that doesn't necessarily involve damage. And that's what's so innovative about this. These dice can be used in multiple ways and can really be adapted to any kind of genre or world that you build, and also adaptable if you decide to cross genres, which is something I personally think is very awesome and more people should get into, because classic fantasy is great, but if we look at a lot of classic fantasy literature, science fiction is often blended into fantasy to make some pretty cool and interesting areas, scenes, and storylines that I think could be inserted into games more. And if we think about it and look back, a lot of the original gamers did that as well. And I think the system really adapts to things like that. And I really, really enjoy how simple and versatile and flexible that this is. Now, hearts and effort is very simple idea. Each heart equals 10 effort. That could be hit points, or it could just be the amount of difficulty to overcome an obstacle of some kind. I am simplifying this quite a bit, but essentially, one heart equals either 10 hit points or 10 amount of difficulty to accomplish, is a good way to kind of boil it down from my understanding of how this mechanic works. Now, when we're talking death in the core system, you reach 0 hit points, you start to bleed out basically. You roll yourself a d4, and that's how many rounds it'll take until you die without help or a miracle. I like this a lot. I use this as well in other games or similar mechanics to this, and I feel this is the best way to really deal with dying. Let them be able to be helped if possible, but that this is imminent death, and I think that makes games more exciting. I know I've stated this before in other videos, but I'm a GM that believes in the idea that death needs to be imminent and absolutely possible. And if it doesn't happen to players once in a while, it doesn't become something that's scary or something that drives that excitement that you're really trying to get out of a game. So making death always imminent, always possible around any corner is one way you can really drive up the excitement and tension in a game when necessary. And having these types of dying rules make that happen. This is why I shy away from games that tend to make death really difficult, because when you take death off the table, it's less of an adventure and overcoming obstacles, where it's more of just exercising your will over the world. And to me, that's a lot less fun. It's kind of boring, to be honest with you. Really quick at the bottom here. Number one, death is real. So once it passes, you're dead. Also, I like the blown to bits thing, that if your character reaches a negative 20 hit points, that you're literally blown to bits to the point of not even having a body left. I think that's an awesome little mechanic at the end of it. It makes it a lot of fun. And finally, in the core system, and I didn't go over the entire core system in detail, but I'm giving you the highlights and the things that really stand out to me that I like a lot. And that's really for two reasons. It makes my videos a little bit more concise, and it gives you just enough that makes you want to go out there and grab it and look at it for yourself, which is something I really want people to do. I don't make money when you do that, but I do help spread the hobby, and that's really the point of my channel here. But finally, in the core system, we're going to talk about the legendary hero coin. And a hero coin is much like inspiration or any type of bonus burnable component that you can give a player that says, here's a way to re-roll a bad roll, or to give that ability to a friend. Now we'll take a quick stop at the player's guide, but this gives you the basic ideas behind it. You have character basics. This is where you get your stats, and that's your 6 very familiar stats that you use in this game. That's how you basically build out your character. Very easy. Magic in this game is a roll to cast. Roll to cast magic is just my favorite way of doing magic in a tabletop game, period. And then mastery. This is a great little system if you want somebody to actually increase their abilities during gameplay, this is a great way to do that. This is something that Apotheosis also does a similar thing to, and they go about it differently. But basically, the idea here is you roll natural 20s, and once you do that a certain amount of times, you gain mastery in that particular area. Really awesome little mechanic that you can add into any game. Now I'm going to stop here because this is what I was going to talk about. The basics, we were just talking about the stats, things like that. Very, very basic. Now, Index Card RPG is at least initially set up to have these 5 separate worlds. And, I'm not going to go into depth in all of them. Alfheim is essentially your classic fantasy world. Warp Shell is your sci-fi/space world. Ghost Mountain is your Weird West. Vigilante City is your superhero/mutant power world, and Blood and Snow is your like prehistoric style game. And these 5 worlds make up the quote unquote Runeverse, basically, that are the 5 core rules of what the game was designed for. Now, that being said, the system is flexible enough that if you wish to take this rule set and port it into a world and a genre that you created yourself or into a different one that's already been created and you want to use this rule set, it's easy to do so. That's one of the things about NX Card RPG that is wonderful. You could take the entire system or just bits of it, port it into any other game, use the philosophy and mindset of NX Card RPG in any other game. And to me, it improves the game for GMs like myself that want to spend a lot more time in developing your world through playing than it is through me wanting to just try to spell everything out on paper right away, if that makes enough sense to you. And it's much more of a framework that goes into just enough detail to give you a world to start with and plenty of breathing room for you to create your own spaces within that framework. Really quick during the player character selection, I just want to show you the way that you assign your stats is you just take 6 points and add them to stats as you wish. That's it. You're only going to use the bonus that you decide. You don't even have to roll. Now, as a GM, if you decide you want people to roll for that somehow, that is completely up to you. However, the way the system is set up is that you just take 6 points, add them to your stats as you see fit for the character build that you want, and then go from there. And I think that's great. There's not really a lot of rules to it. You get to choose how you build your character out, and that's always fun for the people that are especially on board to making sure that their character fits the world that you're presenting to them. Now, I fully admit that I am not going to be going through the entire character creation process, as that'll be up to the game that you're playing. Also, I will not be going through all 5 worlds, but since my lists are based on the classic fantasy game, we'll just take a quick look at Alfheim, the Age of Kingdoms, as it's called here, and it's essentially the classic fantasy style game. The biggest things I want to show you about how Index Card RPG is set up that I really like, first of all, it gives you, the player, the things that your character is going to know that's very important about the world. I like this because what it does is sets up a world that doesn't need the GM to give a huge history dump or information dump. This is just something you say, hey, read that page. That's the stuff your characters will definitely know. That's what's important. Awesome, awesome stuff. Really like that. Each world will come with its own list of the available life forms that fits that world's settings. When creating your own, of course, you're encouraged to do the same thing. However, that's always going to be up to you. Just to give you a little quick look, though, here's the human lineage. It gives you some bonuses you can add to your stats on top of the 6 that you already distributed. So that's pretty nice. And it gives you some abilities and stuff that comes along with that. It's the same for other life forms in this world as well. I'm going to make a quick stop here. Just quickly take a look at Warrior. Each world, of course, will give you a class that you can pick from that's going to be specific to that world. This is also a great template for how you could do the same thing for any world that you create or genre you wish to use the system for. But looking at the warriors, you get to see their starting abilities, the loot they can get at the beginning, and the different milestone abilities. If you want to know more about that, delve a little bit deeper into that yourself. I will admit I'm not going to delve too deep. Again, I don't want this video to get too much longer than I know I'm already going to make it. Each world will also come with its own loot that are basic, and then it might come with lists of spells, technology, other things that can be specialized or have power. That's all for the player's guide. Let's go check out the GM section really quick and then wrap it up at the table. All right, guys, we are entering the GM section. And like with most of these things, I'm not going to have an exhaustive, detailed look at the entire section. What I do want to say is, like many other GMs, both before and after me, this GM section was a very eye-opening thing for me. Not only was it confirming some of the things that I had learned by being a GM, but it also further helped me understand how I can apply those understandings and come to other understandings that make GMing a lot easier and more fun for the GM. And I think that's super important. It's a very big basis of my channel, and I do have this section to thank for a very good part of that. So, Brandish, along with the many, many other people who have already thanked you. Thank you for this section. It was such an eye opener for me as a GM, and I appreciate it. The oath, this is important right here. I'll show you the next page. This gives you what the oath is. I'm not going to go through this point by point. Take a look, get the book, get the PDF. This in itself is worth the price of the book, the PDF, whatever you get as a reference and something you can look at to help understand the philosophy of this GM style. See, I really can't express enough how I think this was an important GM section to have. This is something that the corporate game never could do. Succinctly give GMs a way of understanding a framework of how to be a GM and how to do it without having to memorize tons and tons and tons of rules. This was a game changer for many people. I am not the only one who really took to this. So take time, get the PDF and or the book. Check this out. It's worth having just for the GM guide. It's just an amazing, succinct GM guide that really packs a lot in a small space. And most of my favorite games are able to do that well. And he does that very well here. Also, the dynamic dice, I really like how he shows how dice can be used in multiple ways. This is something that's really cool and subtle, but it's here. What this does, as far as what I'm concerned, at least what it did for me, introduced me to the idea that you can use the same dice in multiple ways and creatively. So not only does this give you some ideas to begin with, but it also shows you and may even spark your imagination as to different ways you can use dice in specific situations that come up in your world, the genre that you want to play. And I think for that alone, this very subtle inclusion of the dynamic dice where it goes through some scenarios here, but really to me, it's the inspiration this gives just to the introduction of the idea that I can use dice differently and I can use things on the fly if I need to. To me, that's what I got from this. And I know it seems like a lot from a very small section that doesn't specifically say what I just said, but that's what I got from this. It really introduced me to that idea. It's like, oh my gosh, I can really just use dice in a way that makes sense to the scene specifically or to a specific scenario and just move on and not have to think about it too hard or look up other rules. I love that. I love that so much. Great job here. Right here, it's specifically pointed out how you can use the rules in Index Card RPG as plugins for other games. And honestly, I feel this is what most people do. Now that I've had a chance to take a look at it as more as a complete game, I'm really hoping to use the rule set as a whole and see how that works. And I feel almost like I've done myself a disservice by not playing this system as written, or at least closer to what is written than I have in the past. And that is something I'm going to try to do here in 2025 as I go forward. Here on the PDF in the GM's guide is the three T's: timers, threats, and treats. And this is just a great way to write an adventure. There have been multiple people on YouTube and in different game books and adventure books that talk about the idea of having timers. It's what makes things exciting, it's what makes things tense and suspenseful. Having some kind of timer is a great thing. Threats should be real threats. Sometimes it's fun to have those not too threatening scenarios just to get people warmed up or to get people used to a rule. But after that, threats should be actual threats. And I think that's important. And he points that out here. And treats, giving rewards is what makes it worthwhile. Need I say more? And finally, the monster. This is just a chance for me to show off a little bit of the artwork. And you can see the style of artwork that Brandish has. Very simple. Again, he started with the Sharpie drawings and he kind of leaned into that for the artwork in this game book. And I love it. The simplicity yet depth of the pictures really inspires the type of feel that I think he's going for in his works. One of the things I like, I'm going to stop here on Avenger and Ant-Man. One of the things I like really fast about the artwork that Brandish puts in is it really can fit into multiple genres depending on how you want to perceive it. And I really think that's a little bit of genius about Brandish, is a lot of these creatures you can insert in a classic fantasy game just as easily as you can into a sci-fi game, and it would still work. And I really think that's clever, and not a lot of people can pull that off, and Brandish does it very, very well. Stopping here really quick at Snakeman and Swarm. I just love how this doesn't look like the traditional Snake Man. I don't know why this caught my eye, but I just wanted to stop and show it off really quick. The thing I like about Brandish's art style is that it has a lot of complexity in its simplicity. Yeah, they're mostly just Sharpie drawings, but the depth that's in there and the inspiration that can give to how these things work together and the stories that they create really does draw me into the game and make me want to explore it a little bit deeper. Now, this is just one example of that. Again, there's tons of examples in this book of things like that. I'm just kind of cherry picking ones that caught my eye and really made me stop for a second. Stopping here on the monsters, this is kind of the monster creation section. The way this is broken down into tiers, giving you a good framework on different leveled monsters and how difficult they are, is just really awesome and simple. That's something I absolutely love in games, is when you can create monsters simply but still make them meaningful. And I really appreciate it. All right, the rest of the book is going to be dedicated to the different worlds. There's also a section of alternative magic in the back here that I would let you explore for yourself, but I really do appreciate the contribution that Runehammer is making to the tabletop community on multiple fronts, and how he is really encouraging the creativity and the DIY tradition that comes with our hobby. Once more, I'm gushing again about a game that I really like. So let's get back to the table so I can give you some closing thoughts about this awesome DIY heavy game. All right, my people, I think it's easy to see why Index Card RPG and Runehammer are so popular and influential in the tabletop space. There is a creative and charismatic guy at the helm, many games to choose from, a core system that is adaptable and flexible, and a large and active community. I said it before and I'll say it again. If you're looking for a one and done system and a company to go with for all kinds of games and genres for your gaming life, you can't really go wrong choosing Runehammer and the games and Runeverse that is contained within. Runehammer definitely fits the mold that this channel stands for. If you really like a rules-light system that encourages the DIY style of the older games that includes some really great original art, then check them out. Link to the site below, and that will bring you to other links to other social medias, of course. Now, keep in mind that Runehammer also has his own virtual tabletop, and Brandish not only has a podcast, but also plenty of interviews out there that can be heard on YouTube and elsewhere. So check those out too, and hear from the man himself, like what he has to say about the games that he made and where all those inspirations came from. That about wraps this one up. A big shout out to the Runehammer Shield Wall and their talented leader. You guys are an awesome bunch and a creative bunch, and that's always awesome to see in the tabletop space. As always, a big shout out to any of you watching and subscribing. At the recording of this, I have broke 470 subscribers, and that's pretty cool, man. So I really appreciate you out there. And if you haven't subscribed yet, maybe think about it and join us and join the discussion about really awesome, smaller, independent games that are getting away from the corporate overlords that kind of ruin it for the rest of us in a way. I don't know. I'll probably just keep that in just because why not, right? Runehammer Games, everybody, is a very present and creative branch of the tabletop RPG community that now has a physical store as a home base for you to explore so that you can create, get connected, and as always, so that you can play for fun first. Thanks for watching, everybody.